Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 4 of DC Startup Week. Thank you so much for being here today with myself, Rachel Kretzky, Tanya, and Jill on strategy on how to build a better team. I'm coming from you live from WeWork in downtown Washington, D.C., our headquarters for the week of DC Startup Week. So thank you so much to WeWork for having us be here today. My name is Rachel Kretzky. I am one of the organizers of DC Startup Week and a founder of a tech startup, UPace. Thank you so much for everyone participating. I love seeing the fists coming in. I know we have more coming in off of the waiting room and joining in as we just closed up our 12-to-1 talks. I'm so excited that this week we have 4,000 attendees across the 5 days. Every September, we bring together the startup community to help continue to not only grow, but to continue the DMV startup ecosystem to thrive. And especially during these times of COVID-19 and the pandemic, it's even more important that we're having these conversations to support each other. With that said, we're so grateful that we're able to make this week completely free, so it is attainable for all at entrepreneurs at all different levels of all different types. In order to be able to do that, we couldn't do that without the support of our title sponsors of Insperity, Next, powered by Silman Rogers, Technology Rivers, and Wiz. I'm extremely excited for this presentation today as we have our title sponsors from Insperity, both Jill and Tanya, being with us today to talk to us around strategy and how to build a better team. They're extremely qualified as at Insperity, they support more than 100,000 businesses with over 200 employees nationwide, really helping around payroll as well as human capital management, time attendance, performance management, and beyond. So I'm really feel grateful to have them talk to us today on how you're able to define your employment brand, building a recruiting strategy, and developing a hiring process. We have 2 experts from the Insperity team. We have Tanya, who is a business performance advisor, as well as Jill, a senior performance consultant. So with that, please join me in welcoming Tanya and Jill to the DC Startup Week stage.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining Jill and I this afternoon. Together with Insperity, we're honored to be here and proud to be in our second year as title sponsor supporting DC Startup Week and this fast-growing startup community. A little about me. My name is Tanya Wagstaff, and if I tell you what I went to school for and what I do today, you might say she really didn't know what she wanted to be. My background is pretty varied. College was mathematics and computer science, and somehow later on proceeded with human resource studies and received SPHR certification. For those in the IT world, I am ITIL V3 certified, just to mix it up a bit. And eventually it all came together. I've held various executive leadership roles, from operations manager for North America, director of human resources, director of finance, and VP of administration in privately held and public traded organizations in startup environment, multi-state companies, and international corporations. In my current role as business performance advisor, I work with business owners like you, industry leaders, and chief executives to escalate your business's position in the market, maintain your competitive edge, and ensure your company's sustainable growth and profitability. Jill?
So my name is Jill Chapman, and aloha. I'm coming to you from Maui, Hawaii. And really my background is probably just as varied as Tanya, minus the mathematics, but worked for some of the largest companies in America, as well as my very own smaller organization. I was a business owner for many years before I sold my business, and then ended up here at Insperity just to talk to other people who have, are going through the everything from the startup phase to, we have some of our clients that are large, thousands of employees large. And so working with all of them, particularly around recruiting strategies, how to build in that infrastructure before you actually need it, so that you position your company to be in the right place at the right time to hire the right people. And that's just a little bit about me, but I think we've got some content here that we want to share with you. Certainly want to encourage you to ask questions and to interact. It may be difficult with the number of folks on to be able to unmute yourself and talk and that sort of thing. So don't hesitate to use the chat function as well, okay? Just so that we can make sure that we're really talking about the kinds of stuff that you want to talk about, where you sit right now and what's next for you. So please avail yourself of the chat function. And if you want to try with the mic, go ahead. But sometimes I think people end up talking over each other and that sort of thing. So use that chat function, make it your friend.
Okay. So building a successful startup is hard. You need to develop the right product, service at the right time, and have sufficient resources available to enable you to outgrow your competitors. This means that you're constantly juggling three competing priorities. You have money. Are you running out of cash? When do you need to raise your next round of funding? Product, service, have you built the right product, designed a service people actually want? And then the team, where will you find your next hire? Who should be your next hire? And how will that fit with your existing team structure? It's clear that hiring is one of the most pressing ongoing considerations for startup founders and one of the biggest challenges you'll face. Many startup founders aim to build a startup that improves people's lives, but forget that the people whose lives they can actually make the biggest impact are their employees, not their customers. Building a great team is a prerequisite to developing a great company culture, one that gets your employees excited about their work and passionate about the problems they're solving for your customers. One wrong hire can literally make or break your company. We cannot emphasize that enough. But a great team working in a company with a positive, inclusive, and dynamic culture can be a competitive edge with your startup needs to outgrow your competitors. That's why it's essential to get a comprehensive hiring process in place early, even before you need it, to help you avoid the critical hiring mistakes that can cripple otherwise a promising startup. Today, we're turning our attention to the momentum building across the country and the idea of returning to the workplace or restarting your business for today's world. For many of you, it is not a question of going back to work, as the last couple of months have been some of the hardest work of your lives as you've navigated the unexpected veracity of this disruption, innovating in real time and doing everything it took to care for the viability of your business. But now we are beginning to get some additional clarity in what it might look like to return to the startup ecosystem in a mid and hopefully soon post-pandemic era. The HR considerations we should all be aware of can make all the difference in making this transition a success or a failure. When we look at the current landscape, how was pre-pandemic different than the post-pandemic? Pre-pandemic, startup business models would focus on developing an MVP, minimum viable product, identify the customer, fundraising, and a certain amount of uncertainty. Coming out of pandemic, many of the same challenges exist, except some major shifts have occurred with lack of customer demand, unemployment, economic recession, and increased uncertainty, and still developing an MVP. Three things to consider post-pandemic are your organization's positions, who you are in the market and your role in the ecosystem, planning for today to achieve tomorrow's objective, and finally, your preparedness at the individual, team, and organization levels. A couple of years ago, in their September 2018 issue, Inc. 500 magazine published a survey asking the CEOs of the 500 fastest growing companies what were the biggest concerns hampering their ability to innovate. As you can see, talent plays a big role in the success of a startup. Talent is everything to the success of a company. The 5 biggest factors CEOs believe are hampering their ability to innovate are shown on the screen. And the number 1 issue is finding and retaining the right people. Finding the right people is imperative to the success of a growing company. Taking the time to think about the culture and what that looks like is very important. Leading your people with proper HR strategies will help you in your company's ability to innovate. You as a startup must act today if you want to quickly bounce back tomorrow and at the same time become more resilient in the process. The top pitfalls to super fast growth, founders say, are cash flow challenges, no surprise there, culture, and hiring. Jill, what does a successful HR strategy look like to a startup with just a founder looking to hire their first employees?
Yeah, I think, for all of us, hiring that first employee, hiring a group of first employees, it's an exciting time, right? Very significant milestone for any startup founder, but it's also very challenging. If you hire the right people, you're going to bring on the skills and the experience that you need to move your company ahead, to help develop your product. But if you hire the wrong people, well, the success of your company is at risk. So, in thinking about it, it can be very daunting. Growing your startup beyond the founding team is very daunting. And especially if you've never had experience with this before, right? A first-time founder. But quite frankly, shoe fits for everyone, even people who have been involved in the hiring process before. Because really, hiring at any stage is difficult. But for early stage startups, that growing your team is a particular challenge for a couple of reasons, right? Every new addition to your startup team is going to fundamentally change your company's DNA, right? New hires will impact everything. They'll impact your product development, your company culture, your team morale, your work quality, your work quantity, your team capabilities, and the list just goes on and on. And in a small team and in the fast-paced, high-stakes startup environment, the impact of a mismatch in values, mismatch in processes, mismatch in culture, that's just going to be magnified, right? So it's important to realize that joining a startup isn't going to be for everybody, right? There's just certain people that this is going to be a right fit for. Those are the people for whom these opportunities are going to be exciting and energizing. But there's a lot of people out there that would say, hey, joining your startup, that could be kind of stressful. That could be kind of risky. Because working at a startup is different, right? It's different than working at an established company. And so a lot of prospects are going to be a little reluctant, right, to leave their security, although security is a weird word to use right now, but leave what they're currently doing with an established company to join a startup that may have, no funding, no track record of success yet. So I think that when nobody knows who you are, it's going to be difficult for you to do this. And I think you have to understand, how to identify the right fit prospects. And it needs to be a priority for you. You should be prepared to dedicate your time to this. This is crucial for the success of your company. Because quite frankly, I can make widgets and you can make widgets, but the difference between our two widgets is the people that we hire to build, to refine, and to make those widgets better, right? So that's why it needs to be a top priority. You need to be prepared to dedicate some time to this, and really moving beyond just having yourself working with the organization, yourself and a couple of key teammates. It's going to require some planning. It's like buying flood insurance or jumper cables for your car, right? A strong recruiting strategy is something that you want ahead of time, not when you suddenly find that you need it, right? And so one of the most successful recruiting and retention keys is that advanced planning. It's challenging, but it's the most effective way to make sure that you avoid some costly mistakes down the road. A lot of people don't have a recruiting strategy or a hiring philosophy. They just kind of wing it out there. But that's not something that's just going to fall in place. So when we talk about our Insperity recruiting model, when we talk about or how I might advise you as folks looking to bring new people into your organization, you want to think about the structure. You want to think about your philosophy, your policies, your processes. You want to think about the job design, the job descriptions. You want to think about wages. How am I going to fit in the marketplace? Am I going to pay more, pay less? Am I going to try to meet the market? But understanding where you want to come in from a wage strategy perspective. You want to know how you're going to go through the interviews. Are you going to use behavioral-based interviewing, those sorts of things? But to plan for that structure ahead of time, to have that vision before your back is up against the wall and it's time for you to hire. You also need to think about in your recruiting model, your branding plan. What are you going to be saying about your company? It's not unlike the branding plan that you go through to market your products or services. Your branding plan from an employment perspective is, why would people want to come work for you, right? What are you being able to say? How can you articulate why someone would want to leave their current role and come join your firm? So understanding that brand development, understanding partitioning off part of your website to talk about career development, even before you have careers to offer, but being ready for that. Thinking about where will you go to look for the kinds of folks that you need, developing that sourcing strategy as well. And then, like I said before, in building out your structure, you need to take that one step further and really think about what is interviewing going to look like when you identify some candidates. How are you going to interview them? Are you going to offer assessments? Are you going to offer background checks and drug screens and things like that? How are you going to make an offer to these individuals? Are you going to do it on the phone and writing? Are you going to have a bunch of people involved in the offer letting? Are you going to do contingent offers and wait for them to pass certain milestones or certain markers before you actually bring them on board? But thinking about all of these things, your structure, your branding plan, the selection, those are the things that are going to lead you to the right hire. And I think when we talk about, really looking at those key positions and looking to hire those very, very important first folks within your organization, it's really an act of prioritization, right? And this is kind of ongoing because your priorities may change. Those of you who were, in a phase beyond writing out your business plan on a napkin, pre-pandemic, no doubt, have made some major changes over the last couple of months. So prioritization becomes a bit of a game, a strategy, and constantly making decisions and rethinking those decisions and reorganizing. But you need to make decisions about who your next hire should be. And that's based on your workload and your eventual team's skill set, the people that you have on board already. And so when you're looking to hire, you're thinking about those fluctuations in your workload. You're thinking about the types of works that's going to be required. Because as your startup grows, right, your priorities are going to expand. You're going to go from product development, which may be where some of you are right now, to reaching prospective customers. So the tone and the tenor of the kinds of folks that you would be bringing on would be those that could help you to acquire paying customers or retain those customers. So again, that prioritization of what's important in the moment and what we're going to be looking for right now. Because if you're focused on product development, you're gonna be hiring what? Developers, right? You're gonna not need customer support personnel because you don't have any customers yet. But as you move out of that phase and into one where you're into customer acquisition and customer retention, you're going to need a lot more customer support personnel, right? Customer success personnel, if you will. But the other part of that coin is not just what's happening in your business, but what are the skill sets that you're missing? Always having a good inventory of who you have on board and being honest about those skills. Most of us get into business because we have an idea, right? We see a need in the marketplace and we're looking to fulfill that. We don't get into the business because we want to fill out forms all day. We don't get into business because we want to handle people problems. We don't get into business because we want to handle customer relations issues and those sorts of things. So we have to recognize that for a lot of us, if we're starting up an organization, there's a certain skill set that we bring and there's some stuff that we don't bring. And recognizing that, being honest with that, and then finding the people who can pick up what we lay down, right? Who can supplement what it is that we do. We can keep doing what we do well, but hire other people who do things better than us, to take on those other roles. And then when to hire, not just who do you hire, but when do I actually pull the trigger on this, right? I think if you hire too early, you're going to be stretched for cash. You hire too late, any team that you already have is going to be maxed out and have too much of a workload. And then would you even have time train somebody, to ramp somebody up for the organization. So there's a really sweet spot in there that is the right time when you can afford to bring on a new hire. You have the workload to support it, but you don't have so much work that you don't have time to recruit or onboard a new hire without everything else becoming overwhelming. Because, you know, like Tanya said, we're juggling a lot of things, right? We're juggling time, we're juggling money, we're juggling that workload, and those things are constantly changing. So when it comes to hiring your first few people, the decision to hire, it's going to feel a lot like a gut instinct. But as your team begins to build, it needs to be so much more strategic, right? That you want to plan out those hires several months in advance and kind of be on the ready. You know, I didn't even talk about investors, right? They're an integral part of when it is time to hire, because your investors are going to ask you those questions, right? They're looking not just at you and not just at the product and service, but they're looking at that team behind you, right? And sometimes to them, that's more important than your product or service. You know, it's more important than your idea. So do you have the right skill sets? Do you have the right people with the right amount of drive, the right amount of experience, the temperament to be able to grow the business? Because that's what the investors are all interested in. They're going to ask you, how do you plan to scale in the coming years? You've got to have your plans outlined. You've got to hit this before you actually need to bring on those folks. Tanya is so eager for me to hit that slide about culture by design. So now, Tanya, let's go ahead and move so I can talk to some of that, I think. Just to be able to talk to you about how important it is to understand what your culture is, what you want your culture to be, and build to that. We have a CEO, his name's Paul Servati, who started the company. He is the founder of Insperity, and he wrote a book, maybe almost 2 years ago, I guess now, but very clearly in this book, and today when we have conversations about the culture of Insperity, he talks about how when it was just him and his other co-founder, how they built the company with that culture in mind. They had articulated their mission, vision, values well before they hired their first employee, and they made sure that the hires that came subsequent to that also bought into that culture. So it was culture by design. And some of the things that I think you're going to think are important to you is that you want to develop this positive culture, right? Like, who wants to have a toxic culture, right? You want to have a positive company culture so that your business is grounded in something, right? You're not leaving it up to chance. But that culture is born from your personal beliefs, your personal values, what's important to you, how you want those employees to feel when they walk in the door. So again, critical to pin down your compass, right? What are you going to use to think about? So when an employee is at a crossroads, do I turn right or left? Well, my values, my company culture, my company mission says I must take a right-hand turn at this juncture. So before you start growing your business, pin down what you're going to use as your compass. Think about the vision. You know, that's that. Okay, so I can't get the word pin out of my head, but if you can think of your values, that's that. Or the vision is that pin on the map that marks your way, right? It's your target. It's the thing that your organization is constantly moving towards. It's what's going to help you and your staffs to avoid those wrong turns, keeping the company moving in the right direction. And the values, well, those are what you believe, what your employees believe, and how you're going to behave, right? Your values underpin your behavior. So if you're seeing incorrect behaviors within your organization, it means that you're misaligned with the values. And then the mission tells everybody why you're in business, right? What makes your company unique? It's the why behind what it is that you do. And so we want to think about culture-based recruiting. That's recruiting by design, if you will. So once your company starts to grow, understanding those core values, that's going to be key to attract the right people and help people who don't fit those values to self-select out, that they don't come and knock on your door. And that's okay. It's okay for people to not want to work for you. You only want the people who can add value to your organization, right? So having those articulated core values is going to help you to attract, it's going to help you to hire, it's going to help you to manage, and it will help you to keep your talent, because you want people who are going to be aligned with your mission, who are going to thrive in your work environment. So that's just a real quick kind of down and dirty, here's what we do as we're starting to augment our staffs. Here's how we bring people into our organization. But I really want this to be, you know, a two-way conversation. I want to know where you guys are sitting and what's important to you, to walk away from this conversation, to talk about, here's where I sit today. How can you help me to get to the next step? Well, let's have a conversation. So please open up that chat box, use your microphone. We did have a couple of questions that that came from a couple of folks that weren't going to be able to join us, but had asked us personally these questions. So we thought, okay, if there's value for them, there may be value for the group. So I do have a couple of questions that have bubbled up from other folks about, and one of those questions is, you know, some potentially good questions to ask when you're hiring. You know, what are you trying, you know, what sort of things are you trying to elicit? And there's a science behind the kinds of questions that you ask in an interview. And it's not always just about their answer, right? Some of it has to do with how they answer it. Some of it has to do about watching their body language as they answer it. Some of it is to hear just basic reactions to situations that you might put them in, right? Because while people may look good on paper, and it is critically important as you're growing your startup that those people have those right skills on paper, but it's also important for you that their attitude, their behavior is in line with where you're trying to take your company, right? Because again, I've said it before, working at a startup is not for the faint of heart, right? It's not for people who get frustrated easily because you've got changing priorities all the time. So, you know, every position that you're going to have is probably going to have its own set of challenges, its obstacles, things that you're going to have to overcome. And those things could change daily, if not even hourly or minute by minute. So you're going to need people who can, you're going to need to hire people who can respond to those challenges in a positive way, where that just doesn't shut them down or defeat them. Also, while I'm on this subject, I'm a huge proponent of behavioral-based interviewing. You know, asking about competencies. Behavior-based interviewing, if, just so you know what I'm talking about here, is those questions like, tell me about a time when you place the applicant, when you place the candidate in a specific situation, in a specific task, and you ask for their specific behaviors, their actions, and the results of their actions on that task or on that situation. So you're asking them to tell you about a time when. Because those are competency-based. I care that people have basic knowledge, but what I really care more about is, do they know when to apply that knowledge, right? Like I could memorize a textbook, but do I know when to make that knowledge work for me or work for my organization? So that's why competencies are so important, and behavioral-based interviewing gets right at that. So you can ask about things like adaptability, you could ask about autonomy, you could ask about change, you could ask about initiative. And then I just learned in a conversation that this question had sparked with somebody. I heard this great question. I thought this was fantastic. Asking the applicant, where do you see my company? Where do you see our company in the next 5 years? Kind of turn the tables, not where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see my company? And see if they can get in line with the vision, if they can understand the mission, if they understand the heartbeat of your organization. Okay. People, I'm looking at that chat. Wait, oh, we have one. Oh, I see one. One just popped up. So Debbie Ann, thank you so much for participating. And she asks, where are the best non-traditional ways of finding talent outside of job boards, career fairs? You know, what's your opinion about college students for your startup? You know, what do you look for outside of experience? So those are a lot of questions, Debbie. And I will take those in a little bit of order, right? Again, I'm going to say the kind of people that you're looking for probably aren't hanging out on those big job boards, right? They're probably not on the Monsters and the Career Builders and the Indeeds and those kinds of places. They're probably much more niche specific sites that would be better for you. Because quite frankly, you can post on those sites, but the competition is going to be super stiff, right? And I'm thinking especially from a startup perspective, it may not be that you have a ton of cash to throw around behind these positions. And so you've got to be very creative in the things that you're going to use to attract or draw people to you. And I'm not sure that your base for that are hanging out there. So some of the more niche sites that maybe speak specifically to a talent or a skill set that you're trying to engage with. Maybe you need people who are going to help you with the graphic representation of your products and services. So go somewhere like Colorform, or go to some of those sites where you can identify people who have a strong graphics background, and you'll kind of cut through the clutter of everybody else. You could even go on LinkedIn to approach some people specifically, really looking for your skill set and then going straight after them. So either those niche career sites or using social media to your advantage, I think. If you've already developed a website for your organization that gets a lot of traffic, think about splitting off a page. It didn't cost much or anything, really, to split off a page and call it your career site and be able to tout the benefits of your organization and a career with your organization there. You'd be surprised at how much traction you might get just off your own website. And then always look for connections, right? Always be on the lookout for talent, even if it's not somebody that you can hire right now, but start to nurture those relationships. Time's not right now, but I want to stay in touch. I want to know that you're out there. I want to give you first right of refusal when I do have an opportunity. So build in those ways to build what I'm going to call a talent network. People who, in the old days, it would have been a Rolodex full of business cards, but build out a way that you can stay connected to people who you think share the same level of enthusiasm, the same ideas, same value set that you do, and excitement for your product. Because again, timing's everything, and already knowing who these people are before you need them is just another way that's going to make your life a whole lot easier. And you also mentioned something about, let me go back up to, I may need some help, Tanya, with managing the chat.
Sure.
But I know Debbie asked about college recruiting and using students. I'm a huge advocate for green talent, right? Because how on earth are these people going to get the experience if we don't give them some experience, right? And you'd be surprised at maybe the new ideas and things and ways of looking at your problem or your situation that maybe we didn't even think about. We've all read statistics on the value of diversity hiring, right? If you have more women, you're going to be more successful. If you have more diversity from an ethnicity standpoint, you're going to have more profitability. I mean, the statistical evidence that's out there, you can't ignore it. And I would say one dimension of diversity is age diversity, right? Or generational diversity, and adding in those other values, not core values, but those other ideas, I guess, can be very beneficial to you, not only from a talent standpoint, but how it's going to affect your marketing, right? They may think of other uses for your product or service that we didn't, that we weren't thinking about at the time that we ginned up the whole idea for the organization in the base case. So I hope I got most of those, Debbie Ann. If I missed anything, Tanya, let me know.
I think you got it. I do want to just quickly add, and that's because I from time to time it happens in my line of in my role. Don't forget about looking at, if you're like I said, going back to those specific talents and experience. Don't forget those network associations. Believe it or not, I've gone to holiday parties of software developers. There's always an association. There's always a grouping. And you meet people there in a very relaxed environment. And again, as Jill mentioned, if it's not them, they know somebody that would be looking, that may be a perfect fit. So trust me, there's a million groups and networking and trade. We used to call them trade associations. They're out there. So it's one area, thinking outside of the box when it comes to this special talent you're looking for. I have another question here, Jill. Would you recommend learning the STAR method to understand behavioral interviewing? Because it's one thing to know what behavioral interviewing is, but it's another thing to understand what applicant answers mean.
Absolutely. There is a science to doing behavioral-based interviewing. And part of so talking about that STAR technique and what that stands for is situation task. So you're asking the applicant to put themselves in a certain situation or to tell you about a time when task related, something that they were asked to do. The A stands for action. What was the action that they took? Not what did the team do? What did their boss do? Theoretically, what would they have done? Were they in that situation? No, we want to hear, what did you do? What was your role in all of this? And then what was the result? And sometimes when you ask behavioral-based questions, the result wasn't that great, right? Like, I did this and I did that, but I still missed this situation. That's not a bad answer, right? Because you ask the follow-up question, what did you learn from that? Well, I know that next time I will do this. But what behavioral-based questioning and how to get the answers to make sure that you got what we call a complete STAR, that you really understand the situation, you really understand the action, you really understand the result, helps you to take hiring from that gut feel of, oh, I really like her. She went to the University of Texas. She's got to be really super cool, to they can do what I need them to do because they've done it before, or they react the way I need them to react in these situations. So it takes it from that gut instinct and actually turns it into data, because there is a way to take those answers and give them numerical value based on how that aligns with your needs, the key actions that you were hoping to find, and how relevant, how current that experience is. So there's a lot of study that goes behind doing behavioral-based interviewing, but it's worth the effort, trust me. Matter of fact, there is empirical evidence that says that you're 5.5 times more likely to hire the right person if you involve behavioral-based interviewing as part of your strategy.
All right, I have another question here. How do you grow your own talent? Meaning you look for the right motivation, but allow them the opportunity to grow with the company.
Isn't that kind of where we find ourselves sitting now? How many of us had to pivot to expecting new skills and new deliverables from our people because of COVID that had nothing to do with their original job, and so I think that's just going to happen faster and faster and more pronounced as we move through whatever our new normal is going to look like, But I think we learned the value of having the right people from an attitude perspective, right people from a willingness perspective, and dadgummit, we can teach things, right? Because the reality is, you know what they say, that a freshman right now in college, the things that they're learning will be obsolete by the time they graduate. Things are happening that fast. You guys are in tech. Most of you are in tech. You know this, that about the time you can teach somebody something, there's a new version, a new this, a new that. And so we have hiring those people who are malleable, those people who understand, people who get it, that they have to be continuously learning and growing themselves and taking some responsibility for that as well. That's going to be important too. It's not just your job to grow them, but their job to want to be developed, right? And to look for, opportunities their own self. But I think it's bringing in those right people with those right attitudes. And honestly, it kind of takes care of itself as they're on board with the product they want to do. They want to be engaged. An engaged employee is going to do, is going to give you that lanyard. They're going to give you that little bit more over what you expect, and will help to propel your organization to heights that you probably couldn't even imagine. But it's in getting those right people and keeping them engaged. I will say this about development. A bad manager can throw the whole thing, in a black hole. It is very, very true. People don't leave companies, they leave managers. They leave promises unkept. They leave people who are inattentive to them. And I don't think that feedback and attention to them means that, you got to be patting them on the head every single day. But I do think that people expect a level of feedback that for some of us who have hair the color of mine are not used to giving, right? We're like, hey, we didn't tell you not to come back tomorrow, so you must be doing a good job. But there's not that expectation. in the workplace anymore. So making sure that you have the right managers in place is fundamental to your long-term success. You can have somebody who's technically superb, but they don't have that people piece. You're bound to have issues, right? So who you put in those management roles to help develop that talent is super critical. Hope I answered that.
All right, let's see what's here. What are the best practices for finding and building your founding team or co-founders?
Right. So, you know, some of that, especially depends on, you know, if you're really at a super early stage and you have no funding, no seed money, no, you know, you got $25 in your checkbook or something like that, it's going to take a different kind of person, right? To come on board with you than somebody who's already like managed to, you know, to engage in conversations for first round monies and that sort of thing. But all that aside, what you're really looking for in your founding team is to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you and better than you at the things that you, for lack of a better term, suck at, right? Like, and we all know we're adults. We know what we can do well and we know what we don't do well. And we're probably not going to change barring being struck by lightning or something. Recognizing, taking that hard look at ourselves and being honest about what it is that we do well and where we lack the skills and abilities and experiences, and identifying people that are better than you to do those sorts of things. That's the secret sauce to success, to let go of those things that we don't do well. Because there are people out there who are doing better than you and can care as much about your product and service as you do. And because they're in the right fit and they're allowed to flourish in what it is that they do, because you recognize that you can't do it, so you're not trying to micromanage them or tell them how to do it. You'll hire them and let them go with those skill sets that they bring to the table that you just don't have. I hope that that answered your question. I see Vanetta's question. What are some innovative ways for startups to provide compensation when they might not have a lot of cash available? And you guys could probably weigh in and talk to Vanetta as well about, you know, some creative and clever ideas. You know, I mean, clearly those, there's those options that they can bet on the come, you know, that if they do a good job and they bring success to the organization, they'll get to share in that success. But it's amazing to me what some people are looking for today from not a cash compensation, but just from the way that they build out their job, right? That doesn't have anything necessarily to do with money. Maybe it's that flexibility. Maybe it's that, you know, there's some creativity in when you expect this person to be on for your organization. Maybe that you don't put any expectations around that and it's just about the deliverables. And for these deliverables, I will pay X. And when you get those done, how you get those done, not as critical to me as the fact that you get them done. So maybe looking at it, not from a time value standpoint, but from a deliverable standpoint, and then freeing them up to have a side hustle if that's what's important to them, to take care of their kids, to school their kids during the COVID and those sorts of things. So being clever with some of those kinds of constraints can be very appealing in this day and age. Being able to tout your sustainability as an organization, those things that you're doing in the community, those things you're doing to protect your community, touting those sorts of things. There's a lot of people who want to make sure that your values are aligned with theirs. So whether that's talking about carbon footprints and things that you're hoping that your product does to take, you know, to give back to the environment or to an underserved population or whatever that might look like, being able to tout that and to allow them to participate in moving that forward, right? So if you particularly are concerned about an underserved population, well, giving them extra time or ability to work with that population in a meaningful way beyond just helping you to develop your product or service. So some of those things are kind of outside of the box thinking that isn't cash compensation across the table, but really understanding who it is that you're hiring, what motivates them, and then, for lack of a better term, because I can't think of one right now, but kind of exploiting those things that are meaningful to them, you know? And it's not a one-size-fits-all world anymore.
All right. I have another one here. How do you view the tools in the market, such as Predictive Index or Black Hawk, to make sure you build the right team?
Yeah, so I am also a big advocate of assessments. If you ever work with Insperity Recruiting to help you to hire, we will strongly recommend that you engage with assessments. You know, we've been talking a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion lately, and particularly diversity in hiring has been on my radar and conversations around that. My understanding of the statistics is that if you will add testing into your hiring strategy, you will automatically, especially if you move it to the front end of your processes, you will automatically bring in a more diverse talent pool because Predictive Index, you know, personality and cognitive evaluations, they don't discriminate. You know, they don't have the hangups that maybe some and the biases that some of us come to the table with. So it will let more people through your funnel if you'll push these things up sooner because, you know, it's evaluating personality and cognitive skills that you need and how would that fit with your organization. But it will let a lot more people through the funnel than your look at, you know, just going through resumes. So I'm a proponent, you know, I'm a believer. It also helps you to understand something like Predictive Index. Like you can't pass and fail those things, right? You are who you are, but it's an understanding of who this candidate is, the full look at who this person is, and knowing your bandwidth or your manager's bandwidth, knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses and your manager's strengths and weaknesses, you know if this person would be aligned with the job and how much of a management challenge would it be to bring that person on board. And so that's another reason that I very much believe in it. Nobody's right and wrong when they answer these questions, but it will help you determine if they're the best fit for your organization at this point in time. What else you got for me? Because I got opinions. Clearly, I've got opinions on everything. So
I think that is it so far. I think we've answered the questions that were raised here via chat. Oh, let's see. One more came up.
I appreciate your time, your interest, you know, your ongoing questions. Would love to continue this conversation, Tanya, too, to be able to continue the conversation with you. So if you have certain things that maybe you didn't feel comfortable sharing in front of the group, you know, feel free to reach out to us and to connect with us so that we can help you in the future. I can talk about recruiting, talent acquisition, talent management all day long. And again, I come by the gray hair naturally. So I feel like I've seen and done a lot. So if you can leverage that experience and those situations I found myself in from a small business perspective as an owner, and as somebody who built my business, you know, please don't hesitate to reach out. Tanya, you got any closing words, any thoughts of wisdom, any words of wisdom, I guess?
I think we covered quite a bit this afternoon. Here's what I find, you know, when I talk to business owners and company leaders on a daily basis. And here's something very surprising, and I hope, you know, it's something we should take seriously. What we've discussed this afternoon is just a portion of a people plan. Many companies, startups, you know, have a financial plan, have a marketing plan, have a sales revenue plan. But most often than not, maybe because there's no agency investor, who knows, not asking for people plan, that's always kind of put last. And again, you know, unless you are absolutely running a company that is 100%, 99.8, 99.9%, you know, solely run by artificial intelligence, for as long as you have people, you need a people plan. You need to, there's no such thing as having it, you know, you're too early that's what we call intentional, right? And Jill covered it. Culture by design. You're intentional in you know, how you go about things. You've already envisioned it, and like I said, you know, people are just going to fit in and thrive, and as Jill has said, or self-select themselves out. So I encourage you to give it some serious thought. If you don't have it in place, you have our contact information, reach out. But I'm a big proponent. It's very, very critical. Right next to all those plans, have a people plan.
Well, I think it's even more important sometimes than some of those other plans, because you're not going to have sales if you don't have the right people, right? If you don't have the right people, you're not going to have a product to sell. So all of these things feed off of your people. The people are the linchpin to the whole thing, to your success, is the people and the way that you engage with them and bring them into your organization. So in my mind, that elevates that people plan to, that better be the first thing that you're thinking about. You know, what is
very true. For every business problem, it's probably going to be tied to a people problem, which means you gotta have it locked in. So
we'll ask a question, and I think we've got time, so let's go ahead and talk to Will online about performance management. And he specifically is talking about those annual reviews that, you know, we're grading somebody on a 5-point scale, and we're taking a look backward at what happened last year and maybe making a plan for what they can do different or better next year and that sort of thing. I think that those are valuable, and I think that that is I think it's a great exercise to go through, to do that annual review of here's where we were, here's where we want to be, what can we do in this next year to mind the gap, right? But knowing that we can't beat people up on things that they're just not, I think about it the same way I think about usually a team. You know, a team will have the top 10% that are the overachievers and the high pose and all that sort of thing. And you really don't have to do anything but give them a word or two, and then they're off to the races. And then you've got these 10% down here at the bottom that you're like, you know, they probably resigned, but they didn't leave, you know, those kind of people. And they're down at the bottom of the bottom 10%. And then I've got this 80% in the middle that are good, but they could be just a little bit better. That's where I concentrate when I'm talking to my staff, when I'm talking individually. Where's that 80% in there every day that they could do just a little bit better? And that would make all the difference in the world. Those things that they're really good at, I don't pay a lot of attention to that because they're just naturally good at that. It feels good to them. And that's where they'd live all the time if you let them. The things that they are not good at, they're probably not going to get any better. So try to offload those to other people, but don't beat them up for something that they're probably not in their nature to be good at. And take that 80% and look at it and say, you know what, in the coming year, if we just tweak this just a little bit, we could probably move this from good to better, from better to best, whatever, you know, however you want to phrase it. So I do see value in those annual reviews to really take yourself out of the moment, not worried about what's going on. Give yourself time to focus and think about the past and prep yourself for the future. It's just like you would do with a leadership team to look at the overall health of the business. Looking at the health of your employees as they relate to your business, I think is a valuable exercise. But that being said, that shouldn't be the only time that you're taking a look at these things, right? It should be in addition to. And ongoing feedback is critical. Again, I'm going to throw out that saying, people don't leave people, companies, they leave people or they leave managers. And the number one complaint, especially as we start to look at bringing in a workforce from different generations, is the amount of feedback that they get. I think a lot of times when I say the word feedback, some of us are going to rush to this idea of, oh, there's forms to fill out, I have to bring them in my office, we have to close the door, we have to have this conversation, clean off the desktop, all that. Nah, this is just the ebb and flow of conversation. But being able to have a reflection time after a project is finished, or give feedback on how they're performing, and that's motivating, right? We all want to know that we're doing a good job. And it's not that I have to be patted on the head, but I want to know if I'm screwing up. Tell me now. Don't wait six months to the end of the year to tell me about it. Let's talk about it now so I can make the necessary adjustments, because I can guarantee you by the end of the year, I'm going to forget about this anyway. So let's talk about it now. So I think that those annual reviews or those deep dive reviews are are important, but I also think the everyday conversations, the one-on-ones on some sort of regular basis, a check-in, especially in a remote environment, those check-ins are critical. But I think that that's super important to developing your employees and developing that trust and that relationship between owner and employee, manager and employee. I think that's so critical. I've heard somebody told me at one point about, so we have Gen Z in the marketplace now, we have Gen Y in the marketplace, and their understanding of what is good feedback is to take somebody like myself who's not used to it, and the annual performance review is about all we used to get, but to think about what I think might be enough feedback, double it again, and I've probably met my Gen Y and Gen Z employees about halfway to what they think is really good feedback, right? So it's a constant effort. Really, as managers though, and as owners, isn't that our job? To remove the obstacles for our employees so they can do what it is that we hired them to do. So that means we have to talk to them. That means we have to listen to them. And that means that we have to come in and help them to see where the obstacles are and then to make the removing of those obstacles. So as a manager, as an owner, as a leader, you're talking a lot, right? You're involved with your people because your job is to make sure that they can do their job. So that you'll all experience success. Lisa had asked about 360 feedback. I think that's a great idea. I think there may be a little fatigue out in the marketplace for some of that, especially if part of the 360 is you're asking your customer base to participate and that sort of thing. You really got to know who your market is and who you're working with. But I definitely believe in a review process that involves your next in line leader and perhaps your team to weigh in on some of those things. If you can add the outside department people, or you could add an outside customer or a vendor, that's great. But I think just the fact that you settle on something that's meaningful for your organization means everything.
Thank you so much, Jill and Tanya. We appreciate all your advice and tips and answering the questions on the chat. So thank you so much for putting together this presentation. It's so important that, startups at all levels really think about hiring, having a plan and processes in place. And I love what you just said about kind of addressing issues early on and not just only doing it at the end of the year reviews or mid-year reviews, making sure it's an ongoing conversation to give any people you're hiring the support and effort that they need. So I absolutely love that. And thank you again, Jill and Tanya, for a wonderful presentation today. Again, we're in day 4, DC Startup Week. We have an afternoon packed of session and talks on partnerships, pivoting, networking event, women entrepreneurship, social impact talks. So please make sure to look at the schedule. Join in. I see Leah just posted in the chat. Is there a way to access the video after this? Yes, we did record it, and we're planning on post DC Startup Week slowly releasing a lot of these recordings and also promoting that. So I know there's a lot of sessions going on at one time, so that we are able to rewatch and gain the access and insights going on. So thank you, Leah, for that question. So with that, thank you again. Thank you all the attendees. Feel free to pop on the activity stream. I know Tanya and Jill are both in Attendify, so you can take a look at Insperity and what they're all about under the sponsorship page, as well as promotions that they're offering. So take a look at that, or feel free to email Tanya directly or Jill directly with their emails on the screen and mention DC Startup Week. So thank you guys so much. I'm going to end the meeting now, but thank you, Jill. Thank you, Tanya. And thank you for all the attendees.